Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. Welcome to Web3 Warriors, episode 29, featuring Leo Kish from Cortex, and we will be discussing Web3 domains and Web3 content management and what will be the benefit in this blockchain space. Welcome, Leo. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me. Great to be here with Web3 Warriors.
It's great to have you, man. It's awesome. I look forward to a technical conversation. Hopefully we won't lose the audience too much. But yeah, on today's...
Don't scare them.
No, it won't scare anybody. On today's episode, we will be looking at really the implications in web development, right? And on the website side of things, on the blockchain and what that looks like. I want to welcome everybody to episode 29, to Web3 Warriors. I'm David Karoma, go by Chrome in the Metaverse. As we do here on Web3 Warriors, we're really focused on the blockchain and what its implications are for the creator economy, for builders in this space. And, you know, part of building in this space is always and will always be creating a website and creating a digital kind of footprint for your company or even just for your own personal brand, your own identity, you know, online. And so in the context of, you know, the creator economy, in the context of all of these opportunities that Web3 is essentially creating for anybody who takes the initiative to kind of learn about it and plug in the space. We want to kind of have a conversation around how domains may evolve and change because of blockchain. Now, some of the bigger names that you hear about right now in the space is like Unstoppable Domains or Ethereum name service. And a lot of these blockchains actually have their own naming service. So there's also a Solana naming service. There's a Tezos naming service. And what these things do is they basically allow you for each of those blockchains, Ethereum, Tezos, Solana, you'll be able to actually create an address for yourself that can accept crypto, but it can also have other implications in the online space, right? So it can be a web domain. You can connect it to a DNS, a domain name service, and actually connect it so you can have it as a website. But what we're seeing right now, especially on Twitter, is that these domains, these Web3 domains, especially the .eth, but you're also seeing a lot of .tez and .sol are kind of being popularized as a way to show, you know, maybe allegiance or maybe even just the fact that you have like a lot of NFTs on one collection, on one blockchain or another. So for example, I have Web3 Warriors. We have accounts on all of them, .sol, .eth, .tez. And it's a lot about identity, but it's also about functionality, you know? So people, if they wanted to support Web3 Warriors right now, could actually send any amount of Ethereum donation right to web3warriors.eth, and that would work as a donation tool, right? So you're kind of cutting out the need for a lot of those kind of middlemen for fundraising, and it's just really like an amazing tool on that side of things. So when I think about the kind of Web3 domains, I'm looking at it almost purely from kind of a financial transaction point of view, because that seems to be the best avenue and the best use case for the Web3 domains that I've seen, whether it's Ethereum, Tezos, or even on the Unstoppable domain side, right? So it's a fairly big, broad conversation that's very important. Another element of the domains in Web3 is that a lot of the times each domain that you purchase is actually its own non-fungible token, which comes with a lot of different benefits, right? So you can trade your domain on an open market. You can you can promote it and show that you have it in your NFT collection. And it's just immutable, right? So you have that on the blockchain forever. Now it's interesting because some still have a way of actually timing it. So it might work for only 1 year or 3 years. Whereas others like Unstoppable domains, once you purchase it, it's immutable and you kind of have it forever. So that's kind of just a really brief primer on, you know, the Web3 domains that I'm kind of familiar with and how they work. And I know Cortex is basically taking that kind of basic Web3 domain as far as I can see, and we're going to talk to Leo and get more granular about it. But they're taking this like Web3 domain initiative, and I know they have an ENS, for example, that they kind of incorporate into some of what they're doing. But they're also looking at like how can blockchain actually impact the content management side of, you know, building on the internet, and not just having that financial ability to send money directly to a domain, which is amazing and really revolutionary in its own right, but to actually take that same kind of ownership down to the data level and down to the content management level, where you have all of the different pieces of your website actually on the blockchain as well and owned by you in a more sovereign way, I would say, and maybe a more independent way. And then that allows for a lot more versatility, you know? And in this age when I think we're looking at big data, we're looking at a lot of these big companies that obviously, their bread and butter is just everything we do online and they make a lot of money off of it, right? So the question becomes, how can blockchain kind of flip the script? How can it change things for the better for people who are building online like ourselves and everybody who we talk to at Web3 Warriors, right? To actually take ownership of that data and to, be able to use their data for themselves as opposed to maybe enriching, Amazon or Google or whatever the case may be. So with that in mind, looking at all of these elements, all of these different aspects of Web3 and domains and building on the blockchain, essentially, we are really grateful to have Leo Kish here from Cortex, a real expert in the space, building out a really innovative platform. So before maybe we get into the granular stuff, Leo, I do want to thank you again for joining us. And maybe you could just tell us a little bit about, how did you get involved with Web3 and with the blockchain?
Yeah, thank you so much, David. That was a really, really great introduction to the space right now, and looking forward to getting into how we're kind of extending it and deepening it for a lot of these use cases. I got into blockchain early on. My background actually is in science and neuroscience, even though the name Cortex is a little bit serendipitous. It wasn't really intended that way. But when I was collecting a lot of data in my research and didn't really know how to use it, so I went back and got another degree in information systems and started doing digital health and made a bit of a name for myself in terms of bringing a lot of user experience and design and like human interfaces with technology around healthcare, and that got me access to a lot of senior researchers in the field, people like at Scripps Research Institute in San Diego. And the recurring theme we always came back to in digital health and with healthcare in general is that the problem is that there is no database of you. Right? There's, you may go to your doctor and they have a health record, and you go to a different doctor and they have a different health record. They don't share information. There is no database of you. And so this was around the time that Bitcoin was starting to take off, like 2014 and 2015. And I was really intrigued by this idea because, in the same way there's no database of you, what Bitcoin was showing is there can be kind of like be a bank of you, right? It's just your coins. There is of course, the network, but the network isn't owned by anybody. It's run by not a person or a group of people, really. There's the core devs maybe that make some decisions, but in essence, the network itself, the infrastructure is run by protocols.
That's why we call it decentralized, right?
Exactly.
At some point there might have been a centralized kind of figure that was, letting it start, but it got decentralized to such an extent, and we don't know who that initial figure was, so that helps with the decentralization as well.
Yeah, so that idea really intrigues me. Like, could we build a database of you that's decentralized in the same way, where you're actually the one in control of it? Nobody else can access that information unless you give them permission. So I connected with Josh, who's ultimately became a co-founder and CTO with Cortex, and actually connected with the leader of the Scripps Research Institute, Eric Topol. And we wrote a paper in 2015 about this idea in Nature Biotech. But in healthcare, all the information that's out there right now is really controlled mostly by third parties. But I think the key and what we realized in starting to build out Ubase, the parent company of Cortex, and Cortex itself, is that people need to start collecting their information and their content from the ground up. It has to be a kind of user-driven revolution. So while we had kind of healthcare in mind, in the last couple of years since 2020, we've been building out an infrastructure that's adaptable for just about anything on the web. We can go into my definition of what Web3 is.
Sure, yeah. I just don't want to lose sight of the fact that you kind of started from a healthcare medical space. I think that's interesting. We've spoken to someone talking about decentralized science and the ability of kind of cutting out a lot of those companies that are making a lot of money off of just being like middle people in the medical space, right? And being data holders. And, then there's the whole process of peer review that is a little bit questionable in some spaces. So that's interesting that you kind of come from that scientific background.
Yeah, and the vision for Cortex really is to be kind of like a GitHub for anything. Which from the scientific research perspective, that means, you know, you can decentralize a lot of that research too, where and you can enable sharing it. So the same way you kind of like share code and GitHub, you can share your research and information. So
yeah, no doubt.
that's kind of one of the big visions that we have for this.
That's very cool.
But in a decentralized way.
No doubt. So yeah, I'd love to hear your definition of Web3. I don't know how many different analogies we've gone through on this show. We've worn out quite a few different analogies to break down the evolution from Web 1 to Web 2 to Web 3. But for sure, let us hear what you're thinking about it.
Well,
and maybe
there's sorry.
No, go ahead.
There's really two elements of it that I think are really critically important, just to simplify it down. One is the self-sovereign aspect that you brought up, you know, and something that maybe a lot of people still miss is when, you know, you create a wallet or, you know, you get that seed phrase, that is only yours. That's like between you and the encryption algorithm that creates the keys. So like there is nobody else involved in that process. So that in terms of like that identification, you as that private key holder are kind of independent from everything else. You prove, you know, it gets proven that you are who you say you are through the math. So I think there's the self-sovereign aspect, but then there's also the digital asset aspect of it and the distributed nature of it, meaning, you know, that nobody owns the network and that these things like NFTs, like cryptocurrencies, can really become assets because you cannot copy them. I forget who once said that the web was a giant copying machine. What Web3 really means is that the web is no longer a giant copying machine, because each thing, just like the world that we live in day to day, you know, has its particular points in time and space. You may have like a coffee cup on your desk, but you can't have that. Nothing else can exist at that time, at that space. And I think when you think about Web3 or the metaverse that I think will be based on crypto, think of it a lot like that. Like two things can't exist in the same kind of place and time at the same time. Everything's unique and immutable.
That's what's up. And like you say, it's through the math, you know, and numbers don't lie. You know, and that's an important point too on the keys, you know, not your keys, not your crypto is something we hear in the Web3 space, in the crypto space a little bit, because there are centralized exchanges that may sell you Bitcoin, but not let you export that Bitcoin or send that Bitcoin out. And so in some cases they have your keys and you don't actually know your own Bitcoin key, but just want to put that disclaimer in there. And that's why it's always important to, have your keys and keep the crypto on your own wallet. So I like that, what you're saying there. Now, to push back a little bit on the sovereignty side of things, right? Because I think the centralization is always a debate, you know, how decentralized can you get? And when you look at centralized companies in Web 1 or Web 2 and the difference now, I'm looking at the example you have on the website, looking at old web versus the Cortex web. And you're saying now, you know, you have user identity, data, and social relationships belonging to the user. And to what extent is that, you know, like truly possible, you know, and how are you making that possible? You know, I know you just hit on kind of the idea that you have your set of keys essentially. So are you saying that Cortex is providing almost like a blockchain type of storage for your content, for your whole website? And how does the data still belong more to you and to your kind of benefit, as opposed to whether it's Cortex or any other kind of platform that you would be working on?
Yeah, well, it really does all start with the data. So in the Cortex framework and the Cortex network, the holder of the keys is the holder of that data. Now they can make that data public or they can keep that data private, meaning that there's another code, a channel code that for a private space that you might want to share with just other people. But at the end of the day, and of course, there's always a caveat there. Once you share data, we talk about data ownership in Web3, but the lawyers always bristle at that because it's not really ownership, because you can't, once you share data publicly, you know, it's out there.
Right.
You know, once you see a picture, you can't unsee it. Same thing with data. Once data's out there, it can't be unshared, right?
Right.
So we need to be a little bit careful about those definitions, but at the end of the day, you can decide what information you decide to share and what information you don't. and it's controlled by the keys in the similar way. And it's held on IPFS, which is a decentralized infrastructure. So what that means is, like in our network, there will be publishers and users, and it'll be a proof of stake system, much like what Ethereum is moving towards now, towards proof of stake system, where you send your data to a publisher, and that publisher, it could be a social post, it could be, a new project plan that you're working on. It could be something like on a notebook that you'd normally put in Evernote or something like that. There's, it's really it's content. And that content can be sent to a publisher, and that publisher could be like an app, it could be a newspaper, it could be, a traditional kind of publisher, it could be a social network. And the publishers then, by staking CRTX tokens, then they can publish a certain amount over a certain amount of time. But at the end of the day, now you might get kicked off of a platform, like out of an application. But at the end of the day, you still own that information. The publisher doesn't own it. It belongs to you because you have the keys, so you can still decide what to do with it. So if you get deplatformed or something from one of these publishers that you're sending things to, they don't, if you get deplatformed from Twitch or from Facebook or Twitter today, they own your tweets. They own all the content that you've created, right?
Right.
This changes it so that the individual users and content creators at the end of the day will always have that content because they are the key holders.
That's really neat. So when you say they're the key holders, you're saying that the starting point of the content essentially is the Cortex app and the Cortex distribution, essentially. Like there's a Cortex distribution model where you have to hold CRTX tokens, right? Stake the token, and that allows you publishing rights.
A little bit. Yes. So there'll be publishers and there'll be users. Users don't have to stake the CRTX tokens. They can just define whatever relationship they want to with a publisher, or they can become a publisher themselves and stake CRTX token. Anybody can become a publisher.
Interesting.
But I wouldn't say that the content starts with Cortex, because anything can become content. It's more about
I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, is where
that you put in. So it's not,
where the point is
centralized in that way.
Yeah.
So where's a good place to start with this?
Just thinking about, you have a project that you would normally, push either onto your website or you share it up on Twitter or Instagram. How can Cortex kind of allow you to have that ownership before you hit publish? Or would it be a scenario where you get that ownership, but only in the kind of context of like Cortex approved publishers kind of thing?
So what we'll be releasing in the next few weeks actually is a way for you to start publishing your own. And this is just one example, but there will be others, because this is intended to be a platform, that others can build other kinds of applications on. I'll start with saying that when we talk about Web3, the web is content, right? When we talk about the web, what the web started with is HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, which is a protocol for distributing content, right? When we talk about Web3, we're talking about kind of right now a cryptocurrency or crypto token overlay on top of it in a lot of ways, right? Like we talk about NFTs, and you go out and you work with MetaMask, and you go to a website that can interact with the blockchain, and you can use your wallet. But at the end of the day, there still is no content distribution system that's decentralized, right?
For sure. That's what got me so interested in this.
That is what I think the Cortex platform is trying to solve, is to create a content distribution protocol that's user-owned and self-sovereign by the users, so that you can share this information. Now, in the same way, if you think of like Cortex becoming like an HTTP, it's kind of how content gets distributed. The DNSs work with HTTP, right, in Web 1, and now there's the decentralized DNSs, like you mentioned, like Handshake or ENS, Ethereum Name Service, the .eth domains, or ours. We work with Butterfly Protocol. Actually, our CTO wrote Butterfly Protocol, which is another distributed DNS. Oh, wow. So DNSs aren't really very valuable on their own, right? Like you can do a lot of things with the traditional DNS, you can have a but you need to have an email infrastructure. You need to have a messaging infrastructure. You need to have all these other kind of protocols that work with it to make the DNS useful.
Right.
So you can kind of think of like Cortex as that content distribution protocol in many ways, but it's user owned and allows for more self-sovereign and distributed content. So coming back, one of the things we'll be releasing in the next couple of weeks, it's in our testnet right now, is a way for you to start publishing your own websites in a completely decentralized way without knowing any crypto at all.
Wow. And when
what you see is what you get, kind of an interface. It'll be right now at hmn.domains. It's you can go out and claim your NFT domain, which is on Butterfly Protocol. It's a .hmn domain based on your Twitter name. So like I'm Leonard Kish on Twitter, so I have Leonard Kish .hmn, and HMN stands for human.
Human.
So
and it's .hmn.eth though, right? If I saw that correctly, I was poking around on the site
there. That's a cool kind of feature that we've added, is if you claim your HMN domain, you automatically get a .eth domain based on that as well. So if you grabbed chrome.hmn, you would also get chrome.hmn.eth as a subdomain of .eth that you can use just like a normal .eth domain.
Yeah, I did. I applied for it on the Web3 Warriors account, and I got to transfer that ENS over. But it was cool to get the domain. I don't want to brush over the protocols though. You kind of it's an important piece, right? So when you're talking about protocols, you're not necessarily talking about a blockchain protocol, like any new like EIP or anything like that, right? You're talking about like an actual web protocol, and specifically the Butterfly protocol. You said your CTO wrote.
Well, that's a Butterfly. The Butterfly protocol is a distributed DNS protocol. So essentially a smart contract for establishing ownership of different domain names. The Butterfly protocols are a little bit different in that they are full NFTs. So that allows you to do a lot of the things that you normally do with NFTs currently. Like if you're creating game characters or anything like that, or you're creating a new, NFT PFP project, you can do all the same things you would do there, like use custom fields. Like you see some NFTs that maybe have like different power levels, or you see a lot of cool new features coming out around how people are.
Yeah, basically using that metadata, right, to allow to kind of evolve and have changes.
Yeah, so with Butterfly Protocol domains, you can do all that, and you can also issue subdomains, of course. So you could, if you had we'll just use it as an example, but World of Warcraft .hmn or some other domain, you could issue subdomains off of that could be characters, right? And then the characters and NFT is not just that NFT, but it's a whole website and data infrastructure underneath it that you could kind of tell stories with, and each element kind of belongs to that NFT. So it's kind of like building a whole world around that NFT domain.
That's really neat.
The other kind of cool feature of this is that each page, or each kind of like, you can think of it like there's kind of the left side and the right side of a current URL. The left side is the domain name, and then after this .com there's a slash, and then there's a file system, right?
Right.
That defines like where each page lives, or where each piece of content in the website lives. So with ours, similar to ENS, where the domain is a crypto address, with the Cortex network and protocol, each one of those files, each one of those pieces of content is also a valid crypto address. So every time you do a blog post, or every time you do a piece of content publishing, that every piece of content you create essentially has its own kind of bank account tied to it, a crypto account tied to it.
That's fascinating.
So like the use cases that we think are going to come out of that are just going to be amazing. I think both in enterprise, but also in traditional web. Like if people want to tip you just for the piece of content that you've created, they can do that. For enterprise, I think when like carbon credits, like once people start, you've driven a certain number of miles, you might want to purchase carbon credits to offset those kinds of things.
So that could be
so you can
programmed.
tie that, so you can tie that data and that value transfer and that identity kind of all come together in this unique bundle.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. So just thinking about like I'm looking at it on the site now, and it's talking about how like in the file structure, so each file is going to be resolved to a crypto address. And so that's why you're saying if someone wants to tip you for a specific piece of content, they would be able to theoretically do what? So you click on that file that is attached to an address.
In the same way that your .eth name right now is a crypto address,
right.
You can just use that URL as the crypto address.
Oh, okay. So it would be a matter where
but the full thing that goes down to that piece of content.
Okay. So if you were to take the actual address, like chrome.crtx / whatever file it is, you copy that whole address in, and you can actually send crypto to that address. That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Wow. And would you need to be using like a specific Cortex wallet to do that, or there? I feel like only certain wallets would be able to send that, right?
No, we'll have things that work with MetaMask. It's for us right now. It depends a little bit on priority. We are going to have some cool signing tools because we're focused a little bit more currently on the content than the value transfer. And there are current wallets out there that are, wallets were created because they're, for those value transfer.
I'm thinking about the applications.
Transfer use cases.
Yeah.
We're a little bit more focused on the content use cases. So we're going to have some cool multi-sig features like for groups and
right. That's how I was going to go.
Actually, they
actually
sign different pieces of content.
That was one of my questions. That was one of my questions. How do you build out for a team, right? Because a lot of websites are co-managed by a whole team of people. So that's really amazing. So thinking about the idea of like you've stopped on a specific blog article that just really resonated with you and sparked an idea in your head that you're like passionate about, and you're like, I want to tip this person, and this specific blog was amazing. So you can just copy the blog address, plop it into your MetaMask, send 0.02.
Oh, you'll be able to do it directly.
Not right now, but I'm saying in theory down the road, right?
Pretty soon you'll be able to just click directly on the page and be able to do that.
And just tip direct, and it'll be like a signing feature where you just
MetaMask or
right, you just sign off to do it. Okay, so thinking about that then, looking at the benefits in the metaverse, right? How do you see this kind of playing out in the digital space and in the immersive digital space like a metaverse?
Oh, wow. There's so many ways. I think the coolest thing about this is that, and without getting too technical, is that right now keys aren't related, and this is going to get way out there.
No, it's good. It's good.
You asked for where this is going, so we'll go there. Right now, keys aren't really related to each other except in terms of transactions, more or less. There's probably a lot of caveats there, right? Like you use an address, it goes into a transaction, you sign something on chain. And what this does with the namespace, which is this like how the files are related to each other in a human readable way, they aren't just, crypto addresses that are, not readable very well, right. Or remember, and very hard to remember for
impossible,
us humans.
Really purposely made to be impossible.
This kind of puts crypto addresses into a human readable structure, so it kind of creates like a relational dimensionality to these crypto addresses. So we're working on some pretty cool use cases around like the real world modeling of, say, buildings. And things in the real world where you'd want to specify unique features about, a building or where things are in the real world, and be able to kind of define a crypto space. So like if you're building a model of your home, like every spot in the home could potentially have a crypto address attached to it.
Okay, I can see that.
So, you could, I think in terms of the economy that we'll see in the future, I think it's going to be very much like that. I think like the whole world will be kind of mapped out, and like the owner of that piece of property will have new ways of interacting and defining and proving things about that property or that asset, or whether it's a radio tower or it's a submarine, or I don't know, whatever you
No,
can think of.
yeah.
There's going to be like whole new ways of putting value transfer capabilities and information proving capabilities about those things in the real world. I think that's the most exciting thing. I always say, if you think about the word metaverse, meta means about, or a layer above that's self-referential on the area below. Right. So when we talk about a metaverse, we're not talking about some other universe that we're creating, at least the way I think about it. We're talking about a layer above that refers to the world that we live in, right? Yeah. So I think the most exciting things that we're thinking about are ways of interacting kind of this crypto-based metaverse where every kind of point in space and time kind of has a crypto address related to it, and how how that's going to impact the real world, both for there's no shortage of needs for verifiable information about a thing in time, and there's no lack of a need for value transfer around those things. So I think and we're just starting to scratch the surface of what's possible.
I can see the angle you're taking, and it is quite an ambitious, amazing kind of roadmap you've laid out there. But looking at like the actual application, you talked about how using that name instead of the long digits for your wallet address, for sure. And I think that's kind of what, maybe ENS, for example, and some of these other places have kind of harped on. And like you said, been very focused on the transactional side of that. Like, you don't need to type in their wallet address anymore. Just send it to chrome.eth or, whatever. So that's a good advantage. But it sounds like everything else you just talked about, as far as having that, kind of sovereign wallet attached to each layer of data, like that's the new thing that Cortex is really trying to bring to the stage, right? And looking at that protocol again, the way you had it laid out here, like you're essentially aiming to replace HTTP. Is that an accurate?
Say that. Like replace? No, I mean I think
complement maybe.
Complement in a way that's user owned. Again, the lawyers don't like the ownership word, but user controlled way, so that the data ultimately you build your own world of content and information around you, and you as the key holder are the ones that can control that content. It'll always belong to you in the same way. Unless somebody steals your wallet, nobody can take your coins.
Very cool. So I know you talked about how you're going to have the actual website publishing tool ideally ready in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, it's in testnet right now. So we have, and it'll be very much like WordPress or Squarespace or something, or
very cool,
something like that, where you just can just create a website on the fly. It'll be pretty basic at first, but all the things that we've talked about will be part of that. You might not be able to access them, but in the infrastructure, they're all there. And so it's just kind of like, at that point, it's just a matter of us kind of opening gateways to access that infrastructure.
Is it a closed beta, or is there any way any listeners who are interested?
Call it a closed alpha still, but
closed alpha.
But it will be an open beta in a matter of weeks.
Okay. Is there any way people can just follow you on Twitter and check it out?
Follow on Twitter, definitely. We are on Discord as well. I don't know if there's a way you can share that link.
Yeah, actually, it should be sharing in the chat automatically, but I can drop it in there. Definitely anyone can join the Discord, and I will also pin it below in the description, and I'll have it in the podcast description too, no problem. And I should add that this is not a paid sponsorship. I just was really interested in the Cortex platform, so just putting that out there too. I don't know if people getting the wrong idea, but no, I really just, when I look at domains and I look at like this Web3 functionality, basically everything you just talked about is really cool. cool, and is exactly where I think web development should be moving. So I got to ask, what blockchain does this function on? Because to have all of these different kind of layers of data pointing to a wallet, I imagine it's not on the mainnet Ethereum.
So the HMN. So there's different aspects to it, right? There's the domains and the butterfly protocol domains, and Cortex as that kind of HTTP layer can work with. We'll eventually be able to work with other domains as well, but we're kind of custom built with Butterfly, and it's a little easier to integrate. Although you saw we did with what we did with the ETH.ETH subdomains, and we intend to work with everybody.
Cool.
But you can go out and get your HMN.domain now, and that is at HMN.domains on the web, or just at HMN domains on Twitter. You can go and grab those one for free, and it'll be based on your Twitter name. Eventually, you'll be able to get whatever one that you want. Those domains are on Polygon right now, but they resolve on Ethereum as well, and we're adding. They're called zone contracts. So as soon as we add a zone contract onto another chain, they will resolve on that chain as well. So right now, the .html domains are on Polygon, but they resolve on Ethereum, and soon they'll be able to resolve on Aleph 0, which is a chain that does private smart contracts for enterprise use cases mostly. And it's pretty simple for us to add other chains at this point as well.
Really?
The actual token network, the Crtx token will be a Polygon token. Okay. Because with the publishing, one of the innovations that we've done is something we call HD index. It's a new kind of index, which is just a data structure. You can think of it that way. That has some really cool features. But one of them is it allows us to bundle up all these posts and commits and bits of content into a single verifiable hash that gets put on chain. So a single bit of proof that gets put on chain with the publishers. So that really, even though it might only be a tenth of a cent to put something on Polygon, using the Cortex network, you can have pretty much unlimited posts in that single transaction on chain. So it really drives the costs. It's kind of like a optimistic roll up for content.
I was gonna, awesome. Optimistic roll up. Yeah. Your dev talk. Hey, that's amazing. That's what I was kind of thinking. It's like, so basically it's allowing all of the functions or all the transactions, microtransactions to happen and then be like put onto the Cortex block at one time in one transaction, which is like a fraction of a cent, right?
Right. Wow. But most of the heavy lifting of like proving what's being published by whom and when happens in the HD index, which is mostly off chain. But to get that timestamp and get that consensus timing of when something is published, which you don't even really need for most use cases. One of the things about crypto is it's built for value transfer, meaning like you're trying to solve the double spending
monetary
problem, right? Like you don't want to be able to spend $1 before you have $1,
right?
You don't really need that for a lot of content. So, anyways, we don't need to go too deep into that.
Yeah, no, I can see what you're saying though. You don't have to worry about too much of the granular, and it's not really as much of a transaction by transaction. You don't need every microtransaction it's noted. It's
an eventual consistency model, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be resolved at that level for most things.
Very cool. So in the sense of not necessarily something where you'd want to compare yourselves to the unstoppable domains or the .eth domains, you're really trying to kind of complement that infrastructure, you would say?
Well, I'd say Butterfly Protocol, which we're built with, is more of maybe a competitor to those, but there's some distinctive features. But again, we're more of the content layer that could exist with all of those
very cool
decentralized domains. We're the decentralized way to attach user-owned content to those domains, as well as value transfer, like economic
No, I like it.
pockets into that content as well.
Decentralized user owned content is what it's all about. And looking at, I know you've kind of gone into exactly how it's working, but when you look at the Web3 games and something that you had kind of talked about with, having that metadata where things can evolve and things can change over time. When you look at the Web3 gaming space, which I would say is kind of yet to take off, a lot of the ones that have taken off are, to your point, much more kind of monetary and transaction, financial based kind of quote unquote games. But when we're looking at a future where a Grand Theft Auto or, whatever amazing kind of more immersive typical video game experience has some type of blockchain crypto element incorporated, it looks like what you're kind of building would have a lot of potential implications for those type of Web3 games. Would that be accurate?
I think so, because
especially the online based ones.
I think so. And we'd love, so if anybody out there is working on those projects, we'd love to talk with you and explore different use cases. But I think that being able to issue these subdomains that are also full of NFTs that have this whole world of content and information, there are definitely ways that you can start to build the whole story of the character into this framework, and allow them to collect different crypto assets within this framework, right? Like within this whole data tree that kind of lives underneath that NFT character. And the NFT, they could also be the spaces, right? There's so many ways that I think this could be used for storytelling, both within a game and outside of games, around movies and other kind of, like, I think the possibilities are really endless, and we'd just love to explore more of those.
Cool. Well, there you go. You heard it. We got some gamers in the audience for sure, and Web3 game developers specifically. So you might want to reach out to people at Cortex, reach out to Leo, and see where you might have some synergy there for sure. I did have a question again about that CRTX token. So if somebody is looking at this and is really liking what you guys are building and wants to get involved at the ground floor, is the CRTX token available on any exchanges, or how does one?
No, we'll be launching that with the network.
Okay.
So that's not available now. We're looking at launching the network in a matter of months. Don't have an exact date yet, but we have a private sale right now, and we're getting close to filling that out. But no, the token will
join
be
the
launched,
Discord if you want to see how that's working, or what.
The token, the token will be launched at the same time as the network, so that there is an actual use case for the token that's live and all that, all that legal stuff.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see. I guess like you said, it's going to be kind of WordPress style, but when you do have that initial beta for the publishing of the websites, how that looks, and then how that CRTX token kind of comes into play, and the idea of staking a certain amount of CRTX in order to publish, and then the publishers that you get as well, right? Are you concerned about not getting enough buy-in from the publisher side of things, or do you have like a plan B for that if for some reason and do you want to go mainstream, or are you really trying to lean into the independent publishers, I guess would be a better question?
No, I think we're talking to some big name publishers that are looking to experiment with Web3. And I think, if you're looking to build the next social platform that's Web3 and user owned, I think this would make your life a lot easier. So we'd love to talk to you as well. So I think, of course, we would love to go I don't know what you mean by mainstream in this
well,
context.
I'm thinking you look at like Medium.
We want people to use this.
For example, Medium.com, right? So that's a pretty go-to, pretty reliable, academic / independent blog site, right? So you look at somewhere like a Medium.com, I would imagine that would be an amazing partnership for you guys, in the sense of, maybe, though it wouldn't be mandatory, but those who want to take this kind of Web3 angle and publish blog posts in alignment with the CRTX platform could potentially
if
have that set
Medium
up?
wants to go Web3, we'd love to talk with them. And Jack, if you're listening and you want
That's it.
You want to take Twitter to Web3, we'd love to talk with you.
No doubt.
We can make it easy. We can make it easy.
Maybe you wait till Elon takes it over, and then you'll make the pitch. We got a good pitch for you.
Elon, if you're listening,
there you go.
Give me a call.
That's what's up. Awesome. Well, no, I think you've hit on a lot of it. I mean, my main question going into this was really like, how can it be different? You do hear a lot of, I think, rose-colored glasses when it comes to Web3 and data. But what I've seen on the ground so far is a lot of the same old, you know. A lot of the current power brokers, the people who have the big data, are taking advantage. You see, obviously, Facebook changing its name to Meta and trying to make this big power play for the metaverse, whether it's Twitter with their the NFT hexagon images, you know. So there's slowly these like Web3 integrations, but the question then becomes, how much are those integrations genuine, you know, in support of the movement, or how much are they just plays to kind of grab data? Because now, you know, for every person that puts that NFT on their Twitter profile, they're giving a lot more additional data about themselves, the wallet that they're connected to, all this kind of stuff. So that's worth a lot of money. People don't think about it, and we're actually paying money to be able to have that functionality. Meanwhile, they're getting all this additional data from you. So yeah, that was really what drew me into what you guys are talking about and what Cortex is kind of looking at. And I see these quote unquote mainstream publishers kind of tacitly testing the waters of Web3, and I get the sense they're really just looking at, you know, how can we capitalize in the best way without necessarily even supporting the actual ethos, you know, going back to Satoshi's white paper and the whole premise of decentralization and true ownership of these digital assets. So I guess that's my question. Like, maybe it's better off to try to take a more independent angle, but to your point, obviously you want to,
I think for sure you have to be careful not to be led by maybe VCs. And I think, I won't name names, but I've seen a lot of it happen in the space where, you know, they're like, you know, you can kind of feel like it's driven by the VCs. Like, you know what you got to do is you got to become the next, you know, Substack for Web3, or like, you know, that just, and you see them like driving down this path where it just doesn't quite fit, and maybe the technology isn't quite there. And then they start turning, and like changes get made, and like, you know, you see a lot.
And it's like the knowledge isn't even there, you know. It's like they have knowledge of the numbers, but they don't have knowledge.
They're still trying to apply the Web 2 kind of model, but like making it Web 3 somehow. But it's, you know, and the same thing we went through in healthcare, I think, is true here. Like, you can't. It's going to be really difficult to try to enter and become core to this new space working with the old players, right? Because they're going to always default to protecting their share of the pie, right?
Seems to be.
So I think you always got to be careful. And I think at the end of the day, just like the most of crypto, things need to come from the ground up. So, and from the tech side, like if you want to, and this is not investment advice or whatever.
never financial advice here.
If you want to do well in crypto, follow the technology, follow the developers.
That's what's up.
Because at the end of the day, they drive a lot of the economics. Like, you know, it's going to be driven by efficiency, and like there is no efficient Web3 content model right now. So that's the problem. What we're trying to solve, and make it efficient and make it usable by as many people as possible, as simply as possible. So really trying to solve for cost, complexity, and usability.
I love it. And, you know, your target audience here, you got for content creators, for enterprise, and then for content publishers, developers, and applications. Just looking at this attachment that you shared, you know, you're looking to build the next generation Web3 social and content driven apps, migrate to a web where users own and control their info, reducing costs and creating new ways to profit. That's what it's all about. That sounds like Web3 domains,
Well,
Web3, internet, the future we want to see.
yeah, I think that's one thing that gets lost a lot in, and again, a lot of this is driven by FUD from the old
Right.
players
Yeah.
because they, who knows how much. But there's a lot of FUD being spread, and it's not always grassroots FUD, right? It's
Right.
being driven by people who have skin in the game and are trying to protect what they have.
Most definitely.
So one thing that I would love to see get turned around, and I'm actually going to start a podcast on this, is that Web3 is actually going to drive huge efficiencies. So there's a lot of FUD right now about, crypto's boiling the oceans, blah, blah. If you talk to somebody who's in technology, in the Web2 or the older space, like they always, and they don't know that much about crypto, about Web3, they always default to these answers, right?
Yeah, environment, FUD.
Yeah, the environment, you're killing the environment. But at the end of the day, the message I want to drive is that, in some of the examples I've given, this is going to drive huge efficiencies, for the world, and the carbon credits thing. Once you can start to tie that value transfer to verifiable information in a scalable way, I mean, the efficiencies that are going to be driven are just astronomical.
It's enormous. And even on the environmental side, I mean, even just looking at Bitcoin, and looking at alternative energy sources for mining, like that, they've said that that's already helping spur some innovation. But on the NFT side and the projects that are like doing all kinds of environmental initiatives, tracking things better, putting things on the blockchain. It's really next level, I have a lot of faith in the blockchain, not only being good for the environment, but actually pushing innovation in such a way that is enormously helpful to the environment and society,
Yeah, the regen movement.
Right, exactly. Regen, conservation on the blockchain. There's so much to be done, like so many efficiencies to find and ways to improve things. So yeah, it's amazing. So Cortex looking to solve cost, scalability, and complexity. Really cool. Thank you so much. I do want to give a chance if anybody in the chat has any last questions. We're going to wind down here right away. As I always close up with these episodes, you've kind of just touched on it, so we don't have to dwell on it too long. But I do want to hear, when you're looking at the people that are kind of listening to the FUD and are hesitant to get involved in the blockchain and really take advantage of the technology, what do you say to them, and how are you kind of helping to it looks like you're actually looking at onboarding enterprise even from a Cortex point of view, so how does that conversation kind of go forward, and have you kind of found a way to maybe work your way around certain roadblocks when having those conversations?
Well, for one, it's a little self-serving, I always say, so I apologize for that. But one is we're trying to make HMN domains as simple as possible for anybody to get. So you can use a Magic wallet. You don't even need a crypto wallet to get started at hmn.domains. They're free. We're trying to get rid of as many of those roadblocks that there are, and then just make it as simple as possible for people to start experiencing and playing around in this environment. So if you're an artist or whatever, or a music producer, or a video producer, whatever, start playing around with this stuff. And if you don't do that, just go try and have some fun, like in a low risk way. Go on OpenSea. Go find some NFTs that are less than $1. There's just so much. There's so much out there. Just
especially
start
right
playing
now in this bear
around.
market.
There's nothing to be scared of. Like put 10 Polygon in your wallet.
Yeah.
And just go play around with stuff and just see what you can do. Like I would just say, like anything, the hardest part is just getting started. So
for sure,
this is because of those efficiencies. I can guarantee you this is the way the world will go. Not because a bunch of people like me are driving it or pushing people into it. It's going to happen because it's efficient and it solves a lot of problems that exist in Web2 today.
Exactly,
like privacy and security and
and even transactions,
mind control.
Mind control, yeah. The narrative being defined and forced down our throats. But when you look at that Magic wallet, actually, I didn't want to gloss over that. I was a little curious because I'm not familiar personally. I haven't had never used it. So it's essentially like a self-sovereign wallet that's not technically a crypto wallet. Is that how I'm reading it?
I wouldn't, self-sovereign is probably not the
Not even
right
sovereign.
word,
It's just, so would you call it a
they
custodial
are
wallet?
managing the keys, kind of like Coinbase or somebody else.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
So you'd say it's a
But
custodial
I would
wallet?
say it's just a stepping stone to make it easy.
Okay.
Eventually, if you get some money, you probably want to move off to something.
Yeah,
Eventually get a hardware wallet, people.
Yeah, hardware wallets
doesn't
good.
have to be your first step. But
Yeah, eventually you want that cold wallet for sure. But yeah, MetaMask and other decentralized wallets are the way to go to actually have the ownership of your digital assets. But yeah, cool. Yeah, I was curious about the Magic wallet. I'll have to look into that a little bit, but definitely not as interested with off-chain wallets or custodial wallets, as they're sometimes called.
Yep.
Well, thanks so much, Leo. I think we touched on a lot of really important points here. Really cool. I'm looking forward to the future of Cortex. Keep us posted. I've joined your Discord. I'll definitely be watching. And any Web3 game developers out there, and as I'm having those conversations with people in Clubhouse and other spaces, I'll definitely think of your platform and try to promote you there, because I think you're on the right track. So thanks again for the time. Did you have any final thoughts or questions or anything?
I think we've covered it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks
Good
so
stuff.
much, David. This is a really great conversation.
All right. Thank you so much, Leo. And until next time, we'll be live on Saturday. And until then, we'll catch you in the Metaverse. Peace out, everybody.
Peace.